Hello, everybody. We're going to try something that I really enjoy doing, which is called classroom flipping. And so, basically, what that is I do a video lecture for you guys and post it up online, and you watch the lecture prior to coming to class. And since we're going to be starting a lot of hands on things, a lot of labs, it's really important for you to have access to this information ahead of time. And it's nice for you guys to be able to watch the lecture over and over again and get the information that you need. So let's give it a try this week. So we are going to be talking specifically about the Rood approach today. So a basic overview of neuropathic treatment approaches. So they're used with people who have CNS dysfunction. So we're talking about the brain and spinal cord. When there's damage to these structures, so after a stroke, CVA, motor performance skills are going to be affected. So a patient's ability to produce controlled coordinated movement is going to be lost due to abnormal changes in muscle tone, balance, posture, and reflexive movement. So people could be experiencing some hyper or hypotonicity, which is going to then affect balance and posture. Some of those reflexes that we've talked about that integrate in infancy could come back, and that can be an issue that we need to treat. So chapter 21 is a pretty heavy chapter, and it discusses four neuropathic treatment approaches, four different approaches. And so again, today we're going to be covering Rood. Margaret Rood was both a PT and an OT, so she was very accomplished. And her theory came about in the 1940s. Her theory developed from literature on both developmental and neurophysiology. So she then took that literature and combined it with her clinical experiences and what she knew to create her treatment approach, the Rood approach. Unfortunately, Margaret Rood was not the best at record keeping, so much of what is available is based on interpretations from PTs and OTs who have studied her work. So the basic assumptions with the Rood approach. First, normal muscle tone is a prerequisite to movement. It's necessary. Patients with CNS dysfunction experience changes in muscle tone, again, like we just talked about, the hyper or the hypotonicity. And this abnormal tone is going to interfere with the movement. So this approach recognizes that muscles have different duties, and some of these duties or some of these muscles, the work is heavy work, and some of it is for light work. And so light work muscles are really are mobilizers, and they are primarily the flexors and adductors, and they're directed towards more skilled movement patterns. While the heavy work muscles are the stabilizers, and they consist of the extensors and the abductors, abductors. So this allows for maintenance of posture and holding patterns of movement. And together, the heavy work muscles and the light work muscles really work to coordinate movement, which is what we're looking for. Reflexes are the foundation of voluntary motor acts, and they are modified, controlled, or integrated by the central nervous system. So the central nervous system plays a really important role in all of this stuff. And when illness or disease affects this, we're going to have a lot of problems that we need to address. And so using the Rood approach is one method to do that. The next basic assumption is that treatment begins at the developmental level of functioning. So it occurs in a developmental sequence, and you cannot deviate from that sequence. Things need to build upon each other, like when you're building a house. And treatment is going to follow the cephalocaudal rule, so head to tail, and then proximal to distal as well, because we know that that's the way that we develop. So an example, we're going to address controlled reaching for an object, and the book touches on this. So controlled reaching for a utensil, for a fork, for a spoon, before we work on holding that utensil, maintaining our hold on it, and using it for something functional. The next basic assumption is motivation enhances purposeful movement. And we talk about this all the time in OT. Activities should be meaningful to the patient. It's going to result in greater participation in the treatment session, and you're going to get the desired outcomes that you're looking for. The next one is repetition is necessary for the re-education of muscular responses. It helps to develop coordination and assist the brain in developing, memory of specific motor activities. So it's that muscle memory. The more you do it, the more it becomes natural and controlled. Some principles of Rood. The first one is that reflexes can be used to assist or retard the effects of sensory stimulation. So we can use these reflexes to influence muscle tone. So think back to the tonic neck reflex and the tonic labyrinthine reflex. So changes in head position and trunk, head position and the head and neck position can result in an increase or a decrease in muscle tone. And so we can use that to facilitate treatment and get the outcomes that we're looking for again. The next is sensory stimulation of receptors can produce predictable responses. So responses to sensory stimulation are predictable, and we should be using these to achieve good outcomes. So for example, slow rocking can result in a calming effect, which is going to then decrease muscle tone so that we can work with the person and we can incorporate range of motion, functional activities, things like that, because they're out of that high tone state. The next one is muscles have different duties. So we talked about heavy work and light work. Heavy work muscles are stabilizers and light work muscles are mobilizers. And so we're looking for mobility on stability. We've got to be stable in what we're doing before we can be mobile. So we need to be able to stand before we can take a few steps and walk. And then we have heavy work muscles should be integrated before light work muscles. So, again, we can't have finger manipulation before we have control of our upper extremities, our arms. The new kitten. Sequence of motor development. Okay, so motor development occurs in 4 sequential phases. The first is reciprocal inhibition. So we're talking about the agonist versus the antagonist. So you got to think back to AMP. Don't let that go out of your brain yet. So it's an early mobility phase. You have muscles acting on one side of a joint, which is the agonist, and that quickly contracts while its opposite, the antagonist, is going to relax. So that's reciprocal inhibition. The next is co-contraction. It occurs when opposing muscles contract simultaneously, which results in stabilization of a joint. So this allows a person to hold a position for a prolonged period of time, like standing. The next is heavy work. So mobility on stability. Proximal muscles move and distal muscles are fixed. So an example of this could be creeping or crawling, where the hands and feet are going to be flexed and the shoulders and hips are moving. The next one is skill. This is the highest level of control, and it combines both mobility and stability. It works to demonstrate skilled movement patterns. Then we have ontogenic movement patterns. So those are 8 patterns, and if you look in your book at page 411, you can kind of follow along with the pictures. And I'm just going to touch on these because we're going to cover them in class and lab. So the first is supine withdrawal, and that's a protective position. Then we build up to rolling over towards side lying, and that's when the arm and leg are flexed on the same side. Then we have prone extension. This is important for preparation of stability in upright positions. Neck co-contraction. It's the first real stability pattern that you're going to see. The cat's running back and forth. It's driving me crazy. Prone on elbows, which allows for weight bearing. Quadruped is preparatory for balance. Static standing is a higher level of integration. And then finally we have walking, which is the highest skill level that you're going to see. So with these ontogenic patterns, we use them. We're going to use them in treatment. So for example, you can use rolling over during a treatment. So if that's where the patient's at, that's what you're going to use. You could have them rolling over in bed to reach for things on the nightstand, to reach for the bed controls, to reach for a card that their daughter-in-law sent them. Okay, you're going to use that pattern in treatment. Prone on elbows is another one you can use, and you can adapt it a little bit to incorporate a tabletop activity. So a puzzle, a game, anything like that. You're going to use those ontogenic movement patterns in your treatment session. So a couple of techniques that you're going to see, skin stimulation. And it's important to remember that these are adjunctive. So these are prior to your treatment session. So light moving touch, icing, brushing, slow stroking, fast brushing, all of those kinds of things can be adjunctive skin stimulation techniques. And then we have proprioceptive stimulation, so quick stretch, muscle tapping, vestibular stimulation, vibration, neutral warmth, light joint compression, which is called approximation, elongated positioning of hypertonic muscles, sensory stimulation. And so these are the things that we're going to be a little more hands-on with in lab. So that was just a quick overview. This is an example of what classroom flipping would be like. So again, you would watch this video prior to coming to class as many times as you need to, take a few notes. And with this one, I do have a video for you to watch, and it's kind of lengthy, but it's actually this woman, I think her name is Dr. D. And so she trained in the Rood technique, and she's got a real patient here. So I want you to watch through this video and see how she's using these different techniques. She's using the vibration. She's using the ontogenic movement patterns with this person who has been affected by stroke. And another great thing about this video is at the end, she's going to have the woman move through the tug test. And they talk about what her score was prior to the treatment and what her score is now that she's had some of the Rood treatments performed on her. So it's about a half-an-hour video. I do expect you to watch it prior to class. And I will see you tomorrow.